In this video, I show you some unconventional techniques to painting miniatures and how I approached painting a skin tone on a Reaper Bones Black Hellhound. So moving on from the gas lamps, we're going on to something a little bit different here with these Reaper miniatures, these Hellhounds. And I had an idea to paint them in a flesh tone, and let's just talk about the elephant in the room here. I don't need a lot of detail in my sculpts. I don't need this. I mean, I feel weird painting them, but you know, props to Reapers for adding that sort of detail. And it kind of ended up a analogy for how this paint went. Not necessarily much for they're not sculpted for flesh tones, really. I think in the end the flesh tones came out really nice, but it just the detail, as you can see right here, the detail on them, while it's spectacular, it's not really best suited for flesh tones. It's a very kind of rigid, rocky kind of sculpt. And so here I am getting ready to spray these things, prime them white. And I probably should have done a little research, because these Bones Black miniatures don't need priming. And so I kind of, you know, that's the first mistake, I guess, that I made this build. And there's a couple that happened, but nonetheless, I sprayed them white because I wanted a white base to start with. And the whole thing about painting skin tones, I've never really painted skin tones on, you know, the major part of an armature, or I mean a miniature, but I've painted skin tones on like a 1/6 scale head. And so the idea is to layer in color. That's really how you get a nice skin tone, is you just layer color after color after color after color after color. And that pretty much eventually will give you your skin tone. So what I did there first is I painted like an undercoat of some purple, some violet, to give it a little bit of underpainting. And then I'm using some Wicked Color flesh tone. And I'll link these products, you know, certain products in below in my Amazon profile. So if you go into the comments below, you can kind of click through and purchase those. It helps the channel a little bit. And this skin tone, I think, is one of the best skin tones I've found. It's called Universal Skin Tone, and it came in a skin tone pack. And my airbrush and everything was just not really doing that good this time. I don't know, it was a lot of issues. Everything was just not working with the airbrush. And so I finally kind of gave it up. You can see that it's a little bit splotchy, but I got enough skin tone to make it work. You can't really see that underpainting, and that's part of the reason was because the airbrush was just not having it, the atmosphere, and something I just didn't really want to deal with the airbrush that day. So what we did is you can see that actually there's some purple, that purple is shining through on the back of those things. And so from there, I went and I did what I do on a lot of other sculpts for when I'm painting skin tones, is I use watercolor. And these watercolor, they're not like your normal watercolor you think watercolor is. These are opaque watercolors. I will link them in my Amazon affiliate below, so you can kind of check those out too. They are some of the most vivid colors that I've ever used. Acrylics across the board, no matter what. Some of these paints that they have in this set, the reds and the blues in particular, the violets, they're just hyper vibrant, and I can't even get some of the vibrancy out of acrylic inks. And so these are really great to work with. Another thing to note here is that after I did the skin tone, I sprayed them with a fixative, like a clear coat. So I did the undercoating of the flesh, and then I sprayed it with a clear coat. And I'm adding more flesh tones now. So that universal flesh tone tends to be a little bit flat, and so I added some browns, and I'm coming in to add some a little bit more of a kind of a pinkish flesh color. And another great thing about these watercolors, you can see that my palette, the foil that I'm working on here, that was actually left overnight. And so they dry, just a little bit of water, and they just, boom, they pop right back up to a workable color. And so they're great also to kind of just have a palette and kind of mix it around a couple days, and it'll be fresh and ready for you to kind of come back the next day. So within each of these takes, I am actually spraying a matte fixative on there. And the reason is that if I mess up, I can kind of wipe some color off. 2, the watercolors, you got to use a little water. So with the water and the watercolors, you want to spray a matte fixative first, just so that you don't take off some of that skin tone that you've already established. And all we're really doing here is just establishing a skin tone. And it's just, several layers of reds and oranges and pinks. And you can see the back there. A lot of people will paint that red that's like the lava cracking out. Well, I went a little bit more pinkish, kind of fleshy, and that actually was one of the only things on this build that I really did like, was that kind of red cracked back looking kind of membrane. Once I'm done with the watercolor, I use a Workable Fixative, and this is geared towards chalk and pastels. And to bring in a realistic skin tone, why not bring in actual makeup? And this is makeup you can buy at like any sort of Target or Walmart or any department store, go into your girlfriend or your wife's, makeup cabinet and just raid the makeup. And the big thing here is that you need that Workable Fixative, and you want to make sure that it says workable. I'll show you here in a second, but you can see how kind of the colors come off. They're super soft. They're really easy to lay down, and they're geared towards paint. They're geared towards skin tone. So why not use them when painting a realistic skin tone? Like it just makes sense. And you need to prep the surface to get them to stick. And workable right there is the key. They have 2 types of fixative. So non-workable and a workable. Workable is going to be the one that you want. You can buy it at any arts and crafts store. And it's usually down by the artist chalks and the artist pastels. And so you spray 1 layer of that fixative on, and then you just start taking a Q-tip and you just start layering in. Again, we're still just messing with the base color here. And so we're layering in more skin tone just to make it look more skin tone-ish and real. So the majority of this process is just layering things in and getting them to look like a real skin tone. And the way you do that is just, I'm going to say it again, I'll layer the colors. And so once you're done with that, that's when you spray it again with a matte fixative. You're just a normal matte. You don't need to even do the Workable Fixative. I kind of spray it with just a matte fixative, and I start painting in some details now. And so here's where you get into the, the collar and the eyes and the teeth and all of that other stuff that we have to work with. Not much here with these guys. They're mainly flesh tones, at least with the way that I painted them. The majority of them are flesh tones. And so getting the teeth in there, the hardest part I think was the eyes. And for the eyes, I actually went back into the watercolor, but just getting some detail on the teeth. I think the only thing outside of like the teeth and the eyes that I painted were the little collars there. And so again, back into the watercolor. And this is really another place where the watercolor shines is when you're doing this eye. When you're doing the eyes, I'll show you kind of a little trick with the watercolor. And we're spraying. So after I got that done, I sprayed it again with another matte. And the benefit for these watercolors and spraying over and over and over again is here. You can see that if you accidentally mess up, the watercolor will go on to the miniature. And I kind of did this to kind of show you how easy it is to clean this watercolor up as well. So you can lay on some really subtle colors, and that's one of the benefits here. I just drop a little bit of water on, and the watercolor just falls right off, but it'll stick on after you spray the fixative on. So as you layer, you mess up, you can kind of wipe it off. And this is one reason that I really like using watercolor paints for eyes, is because it's really easy to kind of wick off and clean off. You can see that just, drops of water and it kind of just falls right off. But with a matte fixative, you can rest assured it's going to stay on a little bit more. I've done this many times with 1/6 scale kind of stuff. And so I know that after you fix it on, it's locked in, but before you lock it in, it's a very pliable medium, I guess you could say. And so before I did the watercolor, I painted the eyes with acrylic paint. I painted them just white, in off-white, used a little flesh tone and a white, you can see right there. And I didn't really do the best job here at filming it, but you can kind of see the paint is saturated with red. And I just dot the eyes right there. And you can see how vibrant this watercolor can get. Again, I'm always amazed. Like, you always think watercolor is not very rich in pigment and not very vibrant, but it was pretty vibrant. And so now I'm bringing out the big guns. And by big guns, I mean the smallest brush that I have. It's a 100-aught, extremely small and extremely kind of a niche brush. I'm only breaking it out when I'm painting veins and painting eyes. I'll link it down in the description below if I can find it on Amazon. But you can see kind of how thin this tip was, and I'm even filming with a macro lens. And to give you an idea, I'll hold it up to a little bit of Nuln Oil, and you can kind of see the writing. You can almost lay like 3 or 4 brushes across one of those fonts. It's an extremely small brush. And so I'm coming in with a bigger brush, and I'm just going to drop a drop of water in, and that's a very fine amount of water. And you can see, just let it sit, and that what happens is that watercolor loosens up, and you're able to take a very small brush. And I'm completely messing it up because I'm trying to paint through the camera lens, but you can kind of see where this is going. You get a little bit of veining and a little bit of detail in the eye. And it was very easy. You just let the watercolor kind of do its thing. And once you're done, you kind of wick the water out with a dry brush, and it pulls it away, and you're left with this just kind of red veining in the eye. It was hard to really get right on the camera, but you can see I did one off camera, and a little bit. I still needed to work it a little more, so you have to repeat the process and go over it a couple times. But you begin to get this veining and these really kind of interesting colors that kind of dance around once you get that wet. And with that, you can kind of create a really neat eye effect, relatively easy, with just a very small amount of things. And so again, that's one of the reasons I reach for watercolor. Once we're done, I spray that all with matte fixative, and this is my final spray. I use Tester's dull coat to finalize the spray, but because it's a dull coat, you don't get too much gloss. And so there were certain parts of these things that I did want to get some gloss on. I wanted to gloss the teeth. I wanted to gloss that little exposed membrane in the back. And so I used this Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. It's a very thick medium, so use a brush that you don't really care about because it's going to ruin your brush. And once you have that on your brush, you just paint it on the eyes and you paint it on the teeth, and it's going to look, give it some moist texture and give it some gnarl, I guess. Make it look a little bit more alive. And you can see on the back here, we're painting the membrane. Then I usually let this stuff sit overnight. It'll dry in a couple hours, but before really handling it, I usually let it sit overnight. And you can see kind of that gloss, how it kind of glosses over the membrane. And the more you add, the more kind of gloss you get to it. So if you really wanted to gloss the eyes over, you can do that. But for the most part, one layer on these guys were enough. I kind of had enough of them. But, after all is said and done, there they are. You can see that once I'm done, as I said, the rigid textures of the stone really didn't translate to flesh tone, and I struggled a little bit with the pig look to them. But overall, I think they came out all right, and I hope you learned a couple things.